Hello, and welcome to UK Paranormal Files. In today's episode, we're going to look at a story sent to me from a viewer to the channel. This episode is the Charing Cross Nordic Alien encounter. A few weeks ago, a channel subscriber, Cautionary, had suggested I post my videos on Reddit and suggested the subreddit RUFO as a good place for me to seek out people that might be interested in my videos. And Cautionary was right. Thanks to posting my videos on that platform, I've been able to see a nice uptick in views and subscribers. I'm just getting started here, so every view, every subscribe and every share is greatly appreciated, as too are your comments, which have been very supportive and encouraging. It is an incontrovertible fact that the subscribers and commenters on this channel are indeed awesome. Anyway, I recently uploaded the Silbury Hill alien encounter video to Reddit. In the comments section, both here on YouTube and on Reddit, I got a response from David. David tells me he has had his own encounter with the Nordic aliens, but also he has visited Silbury Hill, knowing of the story of the encounter with the police officer as detailed in my previous video. With his permission, I'm going to recount his story here. I'm also going to link to David's original blog post in the description section, which details the encounter in his own words and adds a little bit more of his own reflections. This is David's story. I was originally inspired by a Timothy Good Radio 1 interview in which he describes a telepathic contact experience that he'd had in the late 1960s. I decided to try a similar experiment myself in 1991. I was waiting for a train in Charing Cross railway station in London, and I thought it may be a good time to try and contact these beings who are said to live among us, incognito. I asked the question in my mind: if there are any beings from elsewhere within the vicinity of Charing Cross station, could you please come and prove it? After concentrating for around half an hour, I boarded my train and thought nothing more of it. I noticed that the carriage was full, being the height of rush hour. I felt that it was strange that no one who was standing was interested in sitting down in the available seat directly opposite me by the window. Just before the train departed, a man entered from my left and he sat in the seat in front of me. He was dressed in a tan-coloured suit and tie and had a matching attaché case. He was around 6'3", had short blonde hair brushed back, blue eyes. He had a Swedish appearance. Although I made no connection that he might have been one of these beings at the time, I noticed that he was acting strangely by observing the other people on the train. He even at times turned to look around at the other people seated behind. He leaned forward and started to observe his own hands, which I also felt was unusual. It was only at this point that it occurred to me he may be one of these beings. So I asked again the question in my mind: if you are a being from elsewhere, please place your right index finger on the right side of your nose. As soon as I telepathically asked the question, he responded by doing just that. Very slowly and carefully placing his finger on his nose, holding it there for some time before lowering it. I asked if he could do various other gestures to confirm he was from elsewhere, but he did not respond to this. The only other time he responded in exactly the same way was when I asked if he was one of the beings responsible for the crop circle phenomenon. As the journey approached its end, I was thinking that I am not convinced that you are from elsewhere, as you could have been placing your finger on your nose by coincidence. He immediately responded to this with apparent frustration. This reaction in itself seemed far more convincing than the initial experiment. I then asked the question again in my mind: if you are from elsewhere, then please tap on your attaché case 3 times. With both hands on his case, he slightly shook his head and then started to tap with both hands firmly, once, twice, 3 times. He paused for a moment, tapped again, once, twice, and a 3rd time. Then once again, after a short pause, he tapped, once, twice, and a 3rd and final time. 3 sets of 3 in total. He then stared directly at me. Up until this point, I had not established direct eye contact with him, but had little choice now but to reciprocate. As I did so, I noticed that his face was symmetrically perfect, his eyes slightly slanted with pale blue flecks of violet in the irises. His cheekbones were high set. I began to realise the enormity of the experience for the first time as I stared into the man's eyes. I was thinking about trying to speak verbally with him. Then after about 20 seconds, my train arrived at the stop. Due to being somewhat stunned by the experience, I broke the stare and gathered my portfolio and departed from the train. I remember hearing him behind me, sounding frustrated again. Once I returned home, I decided to make a detailed drawing of the man in portrait and profile. I also wrote down on that sheet of paper as many details as possible of the experience. But within moments of doing this, I began to realise that the paper that I had had in my hands just moments before was now gone. I searched around me but found nothing. I searched all around the house. Even I had no recollection of leaving the seat. To this day, I've not found that piece of paper. It is worth noting that I am a portrait artist and the likeness was very close. A few months later, in what I believe was a related experience, I saw a craft. One evening I needed a tool from my garage. At the toolbox, I noticed something moving in the corner of my eye in the evening sky. At first, I thought that it might have been a bat, so I walked outside the garage to have a better look. Low in the sky, I witnessed a large oval-shaped object, around 100 feet across. It was moving like an insect, which is the only thing I've ever seen that I can compare it to. The object had an upper section in blue and a row of circular windows across the middle. The lower half was an orange colour, and I could clearly see a red pulsating light attached to its underside. The craft was translucent. It had a brightness to it and was semi-transparent. After a few seconds, it moved at an incredible speed across to my left field of view. I would say that it appeared to be about half a mile away. It suddenly stopped dead. Then it became brighter in contrast. It became solid and then continued to become brighter. And then there was a flash, and it disappeared. It basically appeared to show the characteristics of an interdimensional craft. After these experiences, I've had a great number of psychic phenomena, including other sightings. Overall, it left a deeply profound spiritual impression upon me. I share this with you for what it's worth. Peace. David. As I mentioned at the beginning, David left me a comment on Reddit. After viewing the Silbury Hill episode, he tells me that I visited Silbury Hill on one occasion, and while near a crop formation, I decided to try a similar experiment to the one I'd previously done at Charing Cross. I asked in my mind, if there are any beings from elsewhere in the area, please make yourself visible in this photograph. Later, I found that a disc-like object did indeed appear in the photograph that I had just taken right next to Silbury Hill. Here is the photograph that David took. And here is a close-up of that object. David's encounter has similarities to the Silbury Hill incident. He interacted with what he believes to be a Nordic alien, who was walking around seemingly in plain sight. David says he communicated with the being telepathically, and that the being confirmed his non-terrestrial identity and telepathic connection by responding to requests. The officer in the original Silbury Hill case does not recall a specific psychic conversation, but he did in time come to recall facts and memories that he was unsure of the origin from where the information had come from. After that original event, the officer saw what he described as an orange-amber glow in the sky above his house, which eventually disappeared at a great speed. And this sounds very similar to the subsequent encounter David records. Per David's account, the being seemed frustrated after being summoned. It is a curious point of speculation why the being made himself known in the first place if he was only to become frustrated. There is a suggestion from some people around the notion of a permanent presence of alien Nordics here on Earth, and in those speculative accounts their motivations are conjectured upon. Some seem to think these Nordics are tied to angel accounts, some tie them to the Nordic and Greek mythologies, and and some believe they are assisting humanity's evolution, either by helping us to fix the planet, or by working in the background to prepare us for eventual contact with multiple off-world entities and eventually understanding our place in the intergalactic community. So, if for whatever reason or motivation these beings are present, perhaps David tuned in his psychic call at just the right time and he was in just the right place. I wonder if the being was aware of David's attention, or if, in its own routine, he meets with others who may summon him in a similar fashion. And perhaps David, in testing the being, agitated him. After all, I think most of us in the usual business of our day are not knowingly, at least, casting out psychic appeals. However, there could be another reason for that frustration, that of the meeting being cut short by David arriving at his stop. Perhaps the shortness of time didn't allow for the full fruits of the encounter to be borne out. It is at this point I feel compelled to add a few words of caution, and a strong caution at that. I know that there may be some of you out there watching this video that might be thinking, that sounds cool. I'm off to Charing Cross Station or Silbury Hill, and I'm going to try and psychically contact them. Please, don't. Or at the very least, be extremely careful and consider a few additional factors first. In the Silbury Hill account, the police officer seemingly surprised some Nordic beings. After the event, he was plagued by what he described as poltergeist activity, and a number of unnerving subsequent events occurred. As I commented on in that video, there may be many that wish to ascribe a benevolent motivation to these beings and their theorised works here on Earth, but the after effects of the officer's case was anything but benevolent. By David's account too, he subsequently saw a UFO monitoring his home, and more generally states that, after these experiences, I've had a great number of psychic phenomena, including other sightings. David also mentions that he made some notes and a sketch of the being that seemingly then vanished, an act that similarly might fit within the definition of poltergeist activity. I know there is little out there of a serious nature that you will find in textbooks or on the internet that would support the notion of telepathic abilities of any kind, so the prospect of it might seem like silly, harmless fun. But I've lived a reasonably full life, and from my experiences and in my own estimation, I'd liken the associated dangers of a random psychic adventure as similar to opening a Ouija board session and allowing anything at all to come through, or in a different context, as being as risky, in a metaphorical sense, as connecting to the internet without suitable antivirus protection. If, against my caution, you are going to attempt something like this, then please do your research and be very specific about to whom you are opening up to. And if you do so, allow fully for the possibility that that encounter may be a negative one, and the effects and consequences might not end there and then. David's story gives us another glimpse at contact with alien species here on Earth, and lends a little to the theory that these beings are among us right now. More enticing than this is the prospect that the ability to see beyond the veil might just be possible for some of us ordinary folk, just like David did. First contact is often thought about in some kind of global and/or formal sense, given our propensity, particularly in the developed Western world, towards leadership and trust in established governments. We picture craft coming down to Earth, we hope with benevolent intentions, the first being their own leader, walking forward and requesting to speak to our own leadership. However, it is just as likely that on a planet so divided by economics, education and technology as ours is, the first contact may come in the form of a more personal encounter. A prospect that, without understanding their motivations, is prospectively as exciting as it is terrifying. Indeed, with thousands of reported cases of various types having been recorded from all around the world, to me it's not a question of first contact, but of acceptance by those aforementioned governments to the truth of extraterrestrial contact already taking place. I thank David for allowing me to retell his story and for following up with the photo taken at Silbury Hill. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the like button and give it a share on your favoured social media. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button and click the bell icon to receive notifications when new videos go out. And please do leave a comment. David may well be present in the comment section at some point, so why not say hello to him there? As always, thanks very much for watching.